Public Safety Subcommittee on Appropriations hearing this morning. We have three guests that will be presenting today on three different subject areas. The first one will be the Council of Superior Court Judges will be reviewing Section 9 of the amended 2008 budget. That begins on page 5 of your handout for the committee members. And let me just begin by saying I want to thank everyone for attending this morning and for the delay we've had. Obviously, the snow days kind of kicked our appropriation schedule around a little bit, but appreciate everyone being here and being prepared. We appreciate the work that the council does. We appreciate the work and the public service of our Superior Court judges. So with that, if Judge Palmer, if you're here this morning, if you'd like to come forward, and Judge Kelly, if he's here as well. We have so on page 5 of your amended budget, you'll see the Section 9 on Superior Court judges, and there's just a few items under Section 9.3 in the amended budget that we'll be addressing this morning. Judge, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you for having us. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kathy Palmer from Swainsboro, Georgia, and I'm currently the president of the Council of Superior Court Judges. I'm accompanied by Judge Stephen Kelly from Brunswick, who is president-elect, so he'll be talking to you next year. And I have Charles Miller with me, who is our financial officer. We don't have a whole lot here on our page under this Section 9. Chairman, as you see, we have a placeholder of $50,000, which is our increase that we have asked for in regards to habeas. You'll recall that the statute increased that amount eligible to the counties from $10,000 to $30,000, and since this payment we are in this year is the first time for the increase, we really didn't exactly know what our increase would be. Mm-hmm. You'll see there in our report, $19,446, but $50,000 is our placeholder. We only had 3 counties that actually asked for more than the $10,000 to which they had been accustomed to being limited. And 1 county asked for the first time, which was Jenkins County, and they are a county that has one of those private prisons that the state contracts with. So they submitted a bill this time, and Wheeler, Tatnall, and Chattooga went up. We are anticipating that there will be some additional increases in the next budget as it gets around that they can ask for the additional amount. But that is the report in regards to that habeas funding to the counties. You'll recall that is a pass-through to the counties. For the accountability court supplements, we did have 2 counties that came online. Lookout Mountain that came online October 1st, and the Mountain Circuit. Well, no, Oconee, that's right, with their court. They came online December 1st, and they have the waiver, and they are in the process of being certified at this time and are undergoing that process as is required. We have the other item, which is a excess of funds to be returned in regards to the new judgeship in Clayton County that was just made available to Clayton County, for which they're most appreciative, by the way. So, and that is our report, Mr. Chairman.
Fantastic. Thank you, Judge. We appreciate that. Charles, thank you for being here as well. Members, we have questions. I have one from our Al. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is Judge Kelly from Brunswick, correct?
This is Judge Kelly right here from Brunswick.
I was trying to make sure we saw who to get.
Who wants to know every judge within 100 miles of his district?
Right.
At least. It's good to know. And I want you to know me too, Judge. It's a two-way street, not a one-way alley. But what I really want to do was just if you would convey our best wishes to former chair of the subcommittee, Alex Atwood. I know you don't go downstairs often, but make a trip for us, please.
Well, now, Judge, quite frankly, since he is a Brunswick judge of the Golden Isles, it's necessary that everyone know who those judges are, I think. It's good for all of us. Anything further than Chairman?
No, seeing no other questions, we appreciate you being here, Judge. Thank you so much.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. Next on the agenda we have is a presentation from the Judicial Qualifications Commission. Ben Easterlin is the director of the JQC, and we're proud to have him here with us. Is Drew Townsend is with you as well, and then Malia Wilson? Are they both here?
They're both here.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much, Ben. We appreciate you being here. We asked you to be here because last year we had an appropriations of just over 200 and let's see, it was $278,000 plus or minus. That was for a new attorney, I believe, and some administrative costs. So what we wanted to do is just follow up with you to see how that was going, how the transition was going, and get a report.
Well, first of all, the transition's been going great. It's pretty interesting to start a new organization with a commission that all the members are new for the first time. Nobody's coming on in a staggered manner, and a new director. So it took us probably a little bit to get our feet on the ground, but there's really great people appointed, and I think it's going well. So we're operating efficiently. And one of the things we've tried to do was be more efficient in the way that the organization operates. So we did hire a lawyer as a second person to be in the department. What I did here, frankly, was to save a little money. I wasn't sure exactly what the scope of that person's job would be. If I had a job description, I wasn't certain what it would be. So what I decided to do was hire a young lawyer on a one-year term. And as a result, the salary was less than what was allocated for that. So we're going to have some savings. Likewise, we have some increases in some of our computer equipment and software to make sure that our records are better kept than the old system. So at the end of the day, we don't need any more money. We won't need any more money next year. We'll probably have money to return.
Well, we're always thankful to hear that because that is a message you don't hear often. It's a message you certainly don't hear from the federal government, but we appreciate you letting us know that. Ben, how is the tell us more about in previous years, and this committee has done some investigation on the JQC and how it's operating. Can you educate the committee on the location of the office, the status of the files and the computers and all the digital files?
I can, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I wasn't sure what information the committee wanted. I felt like that one of the most important things was this commission needed a permanent office. It didn't need to move around with whoever the director was in whatever town. So we have permanent offices, or at least offices where from time to time it should stay, in the administrative office of the courts. We have 3 offices over there. It's a great setup because we get to use their IT people, we get to use their accounting systems and the personnel, and it's just a great money savings for us. Plus, it's very efficient for us to be there, and it should stay. Whether I'm there or not, it should stay in that same place or somewhere like that. I hope it will. We now digitize all our records, okay. And we are actually negotiating with a company that does has a program that is designed for organizations like the Judicial Qualifications Commission to maintain the records so that at any time you wanted to know if a complainant has a record, if a judge has a record, if a circuit has a record, if there's a type of complainant that files complaints more than any other kind, whether it's district attorneys or litigants, or whether they're DUIs or whether they're some other type of complaint that is the most prevalent, so that you can look at it. So at any time, I think once we get all that in, and we got most of it in about maybe say 10 years, we'll be able to tell you most anything. Mm-hmm. And what we hope is that by February, our February meeting, which while you'll still be in session, that we'll be able to file our annual report that'll have all those statistics in there and all that information, and we'll hope to give you something where you can really read that with some elaboration. But the answer is we've spent a great deal of time trying to put everything in a digitized manner. In fact, the commission members each have a secure Dropbox type of situation, so anything they each get all the information As soon as it comes in, they don't have to wait to come to the meetings to get it all. They can keep up with it as we do investigations, and it's secure for each one, and they can go in it every day. So I think we're making a lot of progress in terms of really making the organization not some seat of the pants, back room, whatever's going on, into a really efficient operating.
Well, Director,
Yeah.
that's a breath of fresh air, because that was not what this committee was hearing a year ago and a year before that. So having you come on board and lead I guess the revitalization of the JQC is helpful, and thank you for making the strides to modernize the JQC, and so we thank you for that. Chairman Willard has a question for you.
Well, not so much a question, Mr. Chairman, but I want to comment also on what you just said. Ben Eastland is a outstanding lawyer during his years of practice with a major firm in Atlanta. He has been a former chairman of the JQC, and I commend him for what he did in taking his retirement and coming over and assuming the role as director of this important agency. And I think the best thing about it is, I've had some hands in trying to resolve some problems there, and the best thing is last year there hasn't been a word of any problems or conflict or difficulties coming out of the JQC, and I'm very thankful for your service, Mr. Eastland.
Well, thank you. I'm thankful for what the legislature did last time and for your support. It's really a big deal. It helps the morale, and the people that are on the commission are very, very serious about it, very enthusiastic about what they're doing. The two comments: one, it in retirement. I can tell you that.
I'm not sure. That's small practice.
I understand. The other one is staying out of trouble. It's not that easy either. It is a tough job. These people, my job's pretty easy, frankly, but the people that have to make those decisions, that work on it, they really deserve a lot of credit. It's unpleasant to deal with, I'm sure you understand, and so they do a really good job.
Yes, sir. Vice Chair Rogers.
First of all, Director, I want to echo Chairman Willard's and Chairman Welch's comments. You've done a phenomenal job coming in and getting us back on track, and I really appreciate that. One of the things that you said just sort of jumped out at me was the use of technology and digitizing and things like that. Two quick things. First, do you feel like you have what you need from a technology standpoint?
Not yet, but we're working on it.
Okay.
We have the money to get it, though.
Okay.
We
All
don't-
right.
we don't have a lot.
So it is there whenever you're ready to transition into that.
That's true.
And then the second thing is, and this is a question that I like to just sort of throw out there. I know that there's been some problems in the past. You've done a phenomenal job coming in. Have you had the opportunity to look at what other states are doing and how Georgia compares? And not that we necessarily need to compare, but I always think sometimes it's good to see what other people are doing.
We have, and in October, we went to, there's an organization called the National, it's called the National State Court, and they have a college once every 2 years. And this year it was in Austin, Texas, and we went. And one of the things that we got from that was this computer program that a number of other organizations in other states are using. Some of the states are much more involved and have much bigger organizations. We don't really need a bigger one, so it's hard to follow necessarily what other states do. But we do interact with them through this organization, and almost every day I get an alert or a memo from that organization listing the latest cases they've had and what their results were and how they decided what to do about the judges that had done something they thought was inappropriate, to give us some ideas of whether our system of sanctions and our system of due process works. So yeah, we do that. And one of the things that works well with that is I get inquiries from judges weekly about whether or not what they're about to do or would like to do is appropriate. And we're able now with our computer program to give them a written response that not only tells them what we think based on our rules, but what other states have done with the same situation. So we'll cite New York or Florida or some other place. And that really helps us, frankly, know whether we're on the right track, and it helps them too.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Director, we appreciate your service and the service of the men and women of your commission, and we thank you for the hard work that you've put into this to revitalize that commission. There are no other questions, so we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
We have one more presentation. I see our Attorney General Carr has arrived, and he has his staff with him, and we'll be looking at section 33 of your track sheet, but there's not any request there. But if you want to follow all that's on page 16 of 20 of your track sheet. And I've asked Attorney General Carr to join us this morning. The AG's office, as you may be aware, has had a very successful year this past year under his leadership, and I thought that it was appropriate for the attorney to address the committee, to talk about those things, and maybe talk a little bit about some anticipated needs, but most importantly, to talk about the successes that the AG's office in the state of Georgia has had in litigation, from water wars to other consumer protection matters. So with that, I'll turn it over to Attorney General Carr. Thank you for being here this morning.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for having me. And let me just start by saying thanks to all of you as well. I can't thank you all enough for the support that you've given our department. And I have been so proud of the colleagues that we have at the Department of Law, the passion, the dedication that they've had. And it's been an incredible year. And Mr. Chairman, so I appreciate, again, the support you've given, the governor's office has given us, and we have had a very interesting year. So if I may, I'll take a few moments just to talk about a couple of the initiatives that we've been working on. The first, opioid abuse, also abuse of older and at-risk Georgians, and then human trafficking as well. I don't have to tell this committee at all that the opioid crisis is real. It doesn't matter where we go in the state. It knows no geographical bounds, no economic bounds, no demographic bounds. It's an issue that all of us are having to deal with. And so that was one of the things that I heard early on when I became Attorney General. So what we decided to do, we've got a lot of great groups. We've got a lot of great individuals and organizations that are focusing on this. But the one thing that we heard is that not everybody is communicating. So much like we did at Economic Development, we decided to leverage the assets and the resources that we have and create a statewide task force that's a little bit different than usual and typical task forces, where you pick 7 or 8 folks to go around the state, take some testimony, and then come up with some recommendations. Instead, this is truly building an infrastructure of communication so that we all can work together, again, leveraging those assets that we have. And so we had our first meeting of our statewide task force in October. We had over 200 attendees. We had about 33 different presentations. And what we did is say this: what are we all doing to address this situation? 175 Americans and 4 Georgians are dying each and every day due to this crisis. And I think Governor Christie, when he was the head of the President's Commission, he said this: look, if 175 Americans were dying due to terrorism each and every day, we'd do everything in our power to stop it. And that's kind of what are we doing to stop the opioid crisis in Georgia? What assets do we have where we can work together, private sector as well as nonprofits and the government sector as well? And then 3, if we have some gaps, where do we need to fill those gaps, and how are we going to do that as well? So very, very pleased. We're going to continue to do that. We're focusing on our next meeting, which may be in April, I think is when we're targeting to do that as well. But it's a critically important issue that it's an all-in issue, and it affects everybody. We're going to continue to focus on it as well. A couple of things we're doing. The Wisconsin Attorney General's office has an initiative called Dose of Reality. It's a great education initiative in Wisconsin. They have literally taken tons of unused and expired prescription drugs off the street using this program. So we're going to initiate that as well. And then we focused on drug take-back days, which, again, if you look at where this crisis oftentimes starts, it's in the medicine cabinets at folks' homes. So working with Sheriff's Office, working with CVS, Walgreens, and others to have take-back bins has been a huge initiative for us as well. So we'll continue to focus on that as well. The issue of abuse of older and at-risk Georgians is one that Director Keenan brought to my attention. And the legal term, which what we're really focused. I mean, the abuse of older and at-risk Georgians runs the gamut, from financial exploitation, which is horrific, and 90% of all cases that we see are family members, which is awful, but to outright physical abuse. We had a press conference last week to announce an incredible federal, state, and local partnership. We arrested a number of individuals in a scheme of abuse, not just of individuals, but of benefits as well, in South Georgia. And it was an incredible effort on the behalf of all three levels of government. And we dismantled what was called a unlicensed personal care home. Now, that's the legal term. And as Director Keenan says, they're actually dungeons, because what you have is you have individuals that are being forced to live in basements or attics or in a spare room in a house or an apartment, and they just are living in squalor. So we're going to continue to work with the GBI. We're going to work with the governor's office. We're going to work with our local, state, and federal partners on this as well. This is a great opportunity for our Medicaid fraud unit and for our consumer protection unit to work on these issues as well. And when you see the pictures of these unlicensed personal care homes and what's going on here and in South Georgia, for the individuals were veterans, and so folks are out there to steal their veterans benefits, their EBT card, their Social Security card, is identity theft. It's just horrific. So we're going to continue to focus on that. That's just one of those issues that I think we have a moral and a legal obligation to stand up for those that truly can't defend themselves, which is also why we're involved in human trafficking. And I want to thank the legislature again for working with us last year to make sure that soliciting for the purposes of human trafficking is now a crime. So thank you all again for your support on that. We're going to continue to work on some areas that we found some gaps there as well, but greatly appreciate all the support that you've given us. One of the initiatives that we're focused on is an initiative called Demand and End. And we are looking at the demand side of this issue. Obviously, there's a lot that we focused on those that are perpetrating these crimes. We need to work with the victims to make sure that they get the rehabilitation that they need. We also need to focus on the demand side. So I'm going to be spearheading an effort with a group called Street Grace, which is a nonprofit right here in Georgia focusing on the demand side called Demand and End. And there are 11 state attorneys general, as well as the District of Columbia, that are currently a part of this initiative, and we're going to try to continue to grow it as well. But again, training and education so that we can work with local law enforcement to make sure that we identify situations that we can make a difference in. And it truly, when you know that the average age of a victim of human trafficking is a 12 to 14-year-old girl, again, we have a moral and a legal obligation to stand up for those who truly can't defend themselves. Also, Mr. Chairman, I saw how excited you got when Mr. Easterlin talked about money that was returned to the state. So let me just give you a couple numbers. Through our Consumer Protection Unit, we recovered over $31 million for Georgia consumers and $2.6 million for the state. And through our Medicaid fraud unit, we recovered over $125 million for Georgia's Medicaid program as well. So again, abusing government programs for those that truly need it, we have an obligation to make sure that we end that, and there's no tolerance for that as well. And our department has worked on it. And just one other item, Mr. Chairman, a couple weeks ago we were up in Washington on the water wars issue. Our team has done an outstanding job defending our state. And I want to thank again this committee, the legislature, and the governor for the support that you have given us. Our team did an outstanding job, and we will see what the Supreme Court comes back with. But as you all know, we had had some favorable recommendation from the special master, so we'll see what the Supreme Court does. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, you may have or others.
Thank you. I see you have Deputy AG Dennis Dunn with you, and Travis Johnson, good to see you.
And Adam Ross, our Director of Financial Services as well.
Good to see you, Mr. Ross. Thank you for being here. I have a question, Mr. Williams, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. General, for being here.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned about $131 million recovered in Medicaid fraud.
125. Yes,
125.
Yes, sir.
I have a follow-up question too. Can you give a breakdown? Where's the majority of this fraud being found?
Well, it's providers that are defrauding the program, and this is another Representative Williams. This is a great example of where we can work with our federal partners as well as our local partners. You know, oftentimes you'll have some folks that'll be whistleblowers, but our team does an outstanding job. We have both a criminal unit as well as a civil unit. So that $125 million came from the civil side. We actually had 9 people indicted last year on the criminal side as well. So it runs the gamut. But it's another one of these situations where if you see something wrong or if somebody's a part of the program, in fact, Medicaid fraud was part of the elder abuse case that we had down in Southwest Georgia. I mean, you had somebody that was dealing with Social Security benefits, you had a nurse, and then you had a landlord. So that was part of what we had seen. So it's working with all of our partners to identify it.
Thank you, and
Yes,
thank
sir.
you for your work on elder abuse,
Thank you, sir.
particularly. It makes great political hay to blame the recipient of Medicaid, and we seldom hear about the buck which comes from the providers. They steal the big bucks, not 100 here, 50 there, but the whole train. And I wish we would begin to look closer, and thank you for the work you're doing, because that's where the real bucks are.
Thank you, sir.
Representative, let's see here. Representative Gravely.
A.G. Carr, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Very happy with the report. To continue on with what Representative Williams was saying, the Medicaid fraud, $125 million on the civil side, 9 indicted on the criminal side. There was also a number, $31 million recovered, or did I hear?
From the Consumer Protection Unit.
Thank you.
And that went back to Georgia consumers, and then $2.6 million came to the state through Consumer Protection.
Thank you.
So we're trying to carry our weight there.
Doing a good
Representative
job of
Gravely.
it. Thank you so much.
What is the area or areas that are the kind of the top areas that you're seeing we were able to secure refunds for consumers?
Well, you see it on a couple of different areas. We've seen it on debt collection. It's general scams, and it's generally misrepresentation of a product or a service is basically what it comes. So again, we've seen it debt collection, and in debt collection, it can be a situation where folks are threatening legal. They're threatening litigation. They're saying that they are law enforcement, that type of thing. So that's an area that we'll see it. We've seen it in just general. I mean, it kind of runs the gamut of what we have seen fraud in the Consumer Protect. So it's basically the Fair Business Practices Act. It's defrauding consumers all across the board. But debt collection definitely seems to be one area that we focused on. Again, there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it, but that's one that we've seen a little bit of activity on. That one sticks out to me.
Vice Chairman Rogers.
Mr. Attorney General, good morning.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
I'm going to pick up on that. These guys sort of stole my thunder about the consumer affairs. I carried the legislation a couple of years ago to move it from the governor's office over to the attorney general, and just as a follow-up to that, I think it's probably been, Travis, 2 years, 3 years, something like that now, that it's been under the attorney general. Do you have the resources that you need for that department? Obviously, you guys are doing a pretty doggone good job because we're starting to see the numbers come in, and just wanted to make certain that you had the resources that you need and to continue to do that. And what are we doing, and you may have to get back with me on this, but what are we doing to make certain that the people of Georgia know that it now comes under your department and that there is help available?
Well, I appreciate it, Representative Rogers. Two things. One is I want to commend Ann Enfinger and the division. They have done an outstanding job. They really have. And I think it makes a lot of sense for consumer protection to be at the Department of Law, not just because of the Georgia cases that we have, but there's also a number of multinational, multi-state cases that we'll be involved in as well. And quite frankly, we're a part of the Equifax investigation, and there have been some others as well. So I think it really does make a big difference to have them be a part of our department. I think they've done an outstanding job with the resources that they have, and we are always looking at making sure that we are properly using those resources, and we do have the resources that we need. I think we're doing well, and I appreciate you asking to make sure that we do. I think one of the big things that we need to do, and we're going to continue to do, is to communicate internally. to leverage all the different divisions together to make sure that, and I think we do a good job with that. And I really commend Dennis and Travis and the team for, our deputy AGs, Ann included, Van Perlberg that works on Medicaid fraud. Because once we leverage all the assets and the resources that we have in those different divisions, I think we can, just communicating internally, we can do more. But we'll continue to evaluate our resources, and should we need anything further, we certainly would come to you as far as that goes. And then your second question, did I answer both of them?
I think you pretty much had, what I wanted to know was what we were doing to make certain that
to make sure,
people
yeah.
in the state of
Well,
Georgia knew what you guys were
And
doing.
we live in a communications world.
Yeah.
And the thing that we have gotten the most bang for the buck on, quite frankly, is talking about scams. You know, not just the ones that we're seeing, but we've really appreciated agency partners, private sector partners. We've had a situation where Georgia Power had a scam where folks were calling either folks up on the phone or over email saying, look, your power bill's overdue. Give us your credit card and $250. We'll take care of it right here. We're getting the word out. So we are trying to communicate. CPU is part of our website. It's part of our social media strategy. In fact, it's one of the great things we can do. And one of the things, too, Representative Rogers, that we've done, we are so fortunate in this state to have one of the largest veterans populations in the country. One of the things that we've done is we have actually focused on a consumer protection guide and an app called Basic Training, focusing on the veterans population, working with Georgia Watch and others to target, all right, what happens with student loans, car loans, mortgages, et cetera. But it's all a communications game. And so what we're trying to do is use more and more traditional media as well as social media to get the word out. So as a part of that larger strategy, CPU is part of what we do. Yes,
So
sir.
that means it's going to give you a greater presence in the Georgia community, and they're going to understand and know who to contact and where to contact when they feel like they've been a victim of fraud.
That's
And
right.
That's commendable, and thank you, Terry, for your work on that legislation and transferring over.
And Chairman Welch, we've been trying to reach out to agencies and organizations and others saying, hey, if you see scams like this, let's partner together. More of us talking about it, better off for everybody.
That's good. You'll pull in those that you see it from the other agencies. That's good.
Absolutely.
One final thing from
Yes, sir.
me is that there's a legislation that was very dear to my heart in terms of passage was Rachel's Law, the Safe Harbor Act. That is, as I understand it, that is under in the Superior Court is being challenged for its constitutionality.
Yes, sir.
And I've been reading the briefings on that and the complaints and impressed with the responses that your department has made on that particular issue.
Thank you.
When is the hearing set for your motion to dismiss?
I don't know that we have a hearing date set right now.
We'll get that back to you, though. We'll get that for
We'll
you.
keep up that defense because not only is it defending a constitutional amendment that was passed by over 80%. In fact, it was the one constitutional amendment that passed the greatest rate percentage in the history of our 1983 Constitution. And so excited to see that stay in place and then for the supporting legislation, the enabling legislation to be upheld so that the resources that you're talking about to fight human trafficking, that those resources are available, those rehabilitative services, those preventative services will be available at the ground level. So
Absolutely.
please keep
Thank
up
you.
that fight and
I
that
appreciate
defense.
it. Thank you.
And Representative Williams, you had another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I just was looking at some notes, and I wanted to know from the opioid crisis,
Yes, sir.
with the amount of people that are dying, I mean really dying because of this, I have not seen a huge increase in the law enforcement end, particularly with GBI. So they're pressed. The people that are on the ground are usually deputy sheriffs and local law enforcement. What do you see? What are we going to do? To me, this is the most pressing crisis that's hitting our state right now, and it's getting temporary looks. What's your plans? What's your goal? We got 56,000 people a year in America dying. And I agree with Governor Christie, and that's rare on what he said. But tell us what your plans are to deal with this crisis, because in rural Georgia, where deputies making $10 an hour, And we expecting, and they're the people that know what's going on because they're on the ground. What's your long range
Well, I
plan?
appreciate it, Representative Williams. I can assure you it is not a temporary look from the Department of Law. This is a commitment. And you've hit the nail on the head. And the one thing, again, that I can say is this is a crisis that cannot, must not, and should not land on the shoulders of any one individual group or agency. It's too big. I mean, this is, as I've said before, it's an all-in issue. You need doctors at the table. You need pharmacies. You need pharmaceutical companies. You need K-12. You need chambers of commerce. You need government agencies. You need federal, state, and local partners. And why? Because everybody is impacted by it. We're seeing an increase in foster care, children going into foster care as a result. We're seeing a decrease in life expectancy. We're seeing a decrease in participation in the workforce. No one group can, that's why we created the statewide task force. And now we have a statewide plan that's being worked on, and hopefully here in February the 15th, I think, is when our team is going to come up with the first draft. Our task force is open to 10.4 million Georgians. Why? Because if I asked everybody in this room to raise your hand if you've been impacted by this issue, probably 3/4 of the room would be. Businesses, law firms, doesn't matter. So we have to marshal the expertise, the resources, and the passion that everybody has. So part of it will be legislation. Part of it will be awareness. Part of it will be rehabilitation. But we got to bring the folks to the table that really know what they're talking about. I worked for Senator Isaacson for 11 years, and he used to say, look, I know a little bit about real estate, and on everything else, I need some help. That's the truth. That's where we are on this. You know, I commend CVS and Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and they're limiting prescriptions, 7-day prescriptions. And that's good in many respects, but what about the person that also lives down in Seminole County that has to go to Valdosta or Macon to get the problem with opioids is this: it is a legal drug. There is a medical purpose behind it. And I'm very hesitant to get between a doctor and a patient. But there are doctors that are overprescribing. So this is where the complicated nature of this issue is. That's why we have to have everybody in, and everybody's got to have a say and speak at the table.
One last comment, then we need to adjourn to head over to do the people's work in the House.
Yes, sir.
Vice Chairman Rogers.
Just a quick recommendation, just as a follow up to Representative Williams. I had the pleasure of being at the task force when you did that this year, and the only thing I would say that might be of some benefit was the fact that I knew about the task force. I'm sure maybe I don't know if it fell through the cracks or I just knew about it and ignored it or whatever. But the next task force meeting that comes up, it may be a good idea to make certain that every member of the legislature gets an invitation and can show up at the thing, because
Absolutely.
we had 5 or 6, I think, this year.
That's right.
But to sit there and to see all the resources and see the commitment is pretty impressive. So thank you.
Great point. And to hear what everybody is doing already and figuring out ways to get everybody together. So maybe there isn't a government solution. Maybe there's a solution out there that makes more sense in the private sector, and that's what we're trying to do. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. We appreciate you and your staff being here. We thank you for the hard work that they have been doing over the last year, and we look forward to seeing you to talk about the 2019 budget.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks to the committee.
We'll stand adjourned.